Hello. Welcome to the Justin Haskins Show. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the most radical organization that you've never heard of. Well, some of you have heard of it, but most of you probably have not. It's called the Uniform Law Commission. And this group of highly influential lawyers, academics at elite institutions, universities, law schools, big law firms all across the country, these people are transforming property rights in the United States of America. They are calling for governors to become quasi dictators, and they're laying the foundation for a central bank digital currency, a programmable, trackable, traceable central bank digital currency. One of the biggest threats to freedom that there is today. So, why have you never heard of this group? I can assure you that your local state legislator has heard of this group, that your governor knows who this organization is, because the Uniform Law Commission is one of the most influential, impactful groups that, essentially lobby for legislation all across the country. They advise for legislation, whether it's technically lobbying or not, that depends on the state, but you get the point. They're pushing for legislation all across the country, and most people have never heard of them, unless, of course, you're in a state legislature. So, who is the Uniform Law Commission? Where do they get their money? That's going to absolutely blow your mind when you find out where they get their money. It's a hint. It comes from you. And why should we care about what they're doing? That's going to be the topic of today's episode. Before we get into those topics, however, I would like to give a very brief call to action. Please subscribe to the channel. Like this video, leave a comment. All of this is going to help other people see the channel going forward. If you care about this issue, if you care about protecting individual rights and freedom and property rights, if you're worried about the next financial crash, this is the channel for you. And at the very least, even if you don't like this channel, but you just like this one particular topic, liking this video, commenting on this video is going to help other people see it and learn about this really important issue, because it is one of the most important issues facing the country today. As many of you know, this channel is a new channel, so we need as much support as we possibly can get. So thank you in advance for help spreading the word about this topic. Okay, where to start with the Uniform Law Commission? Man, there's so many different things that we could discuss with them. The Uniform Law Commission, we'll give you a little bit of a background information first, and then we'll dive into some of the really crazy details. The Uniform Law Commission was created in the late 1800s. Yes, that's right. Over 100 years ago. This organization has been around for a long, long time. The idea behind the Uniform Law Commission is a good one. The goal is to get states all across the country to adopt model legislation when it comes to issues where it really would be helpful if all the states had the same laws. So this is especially true with financial regulations, with commercial activity, of contract law. There's a whole bunch of areas of the law that are things that regular people don't pay much attention to. But when you actually are on the ground and you're operating a business and you've got two states with completely different laws, especially when it comes to like the mortgage industry and banking and stuff, it just wouldn't work very well if every state had completely different policies for these things. So the Uniform Law Commission was created in large part to deal with that issue and other issues related to it, right? When would it be useful for all the states to have the same laws? And the Uniform Law Commission, what they do is, as I said earlier, they're a group primarily of lawyers, highly influential lawyers, academics, etc., from law schools and big law firms. What they do is they actually draft legislation. So they're not just people who are advocating for policy changes. They actually write legislation. And then they go to the lawmakers all across the country and they give them these model bills that they've written. So they've done all the work for these lawmakers. And now the lawmakers have to actually pass it. You know, the Uniform Law Commission isn't some sort of supra-government organization that has the ability to impose its will on states. They have to get state lawmakers to pass the bills that they propose, but they're the ones writing the legislation in the vast majority of cases. And then states, because for the most part, both Republican-run states and Democrat-run states have a very high opinion of the Uniform Law Commission, what they often do is they just kind of rubber stamp whatever the ULC wants to do. Okay, so the ULC has its own drafting committees, its own comment periods, its own consultations and things where they get together and they, as an organization, write these model bills, and then they spend sometimes one session, legislative session, sometimes 2, 3, 4, however long it takes to get all the states to adopt these model bills. Okay, the Uniform Law Commission is perhaps most famous for being the force behind the Uniform Commercial Code. The Uniform Commercial Code is one of the most important laws that exist in America today when it comes to commercial activity, contract law, a whole bunch of areas related to economics and property rights and things like that. The Uniform Commercial Code was first rolled out in the 1950s. The ULC, the Uniform Law Commission, was one of the big names behind that. And ever since the 1950s, the Uniform Law Commission has been working with state lawmakers to revise the Uniform Commercial Code, to update it, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, as you'll see in this video. But for the most part, this is a valuable service, right? This makes a lot of sense. And because commercial law is really, really complicated, lawmakers have come to depend on the Uniform Law Commission to give them the right answers to a lot of really difficult questions about the law. So it's not hard to imagine why lawmakers would like this organization, why they would come to trust them. And I think for a long time, and I could be wrong, I don't know the whole history of everything that the Uniform Law Commission has ever done, but for the most part, I think that the Uniform Law Commission did a pretty good job for most of its history of trying to play it right down the middle. Their entire model for getting states to pass legislation really depends on them being viewed as a nonpartisan, they're not for team red or team blue or anything like that, non-ideological, they're not necessarily liberals, they're not necessarily conservatives or libertarians or socialists or anything. They're just the sort of common sense folk that are going to help you write laws that we should all just agree on, right? That's kind of how they've operated. It's how they present themselves. It's how they do everything, conduct business. This is how they've framed their whole reputations. And I think for most of their history, the Uniform Law Commission was pretty much that. I think that's a fair characterization. I don't think that they were this radical group for most of its history. But that has changed over the past few decades. The very first really big thing that the Uniform Law Commission did was in the 1990s, they started changing, or the first big thing that I would say is a really radical departure from sort of the mission of the Uniform Law Commission, was that in the 1990s, they convinced state lawmakers to update the Uniform Commercial Code in a way that fundamentally destroys your personal property rights. I mean, really, it just fundamentally destroys it. Here's what they did. This is going to get a little bit into the weeds, but just stick with me. If you want to learn more information about this topic, I'm going to have some link. I'll have at least one link in the show notes so that you can read more about this. Because it does get complicated, and I don't want this to be a complicated video. But essentially what they did in the 1990s was they convinced state lawmakers all across the country, as part of a revision to the Uniform Commercial Code, to change the way that people relate to securities, investments, okay? So securities investments are stocks, bonds, exchange-traded funds, basically the vast majority of things that you would invest in for your retirement account or just as an investor, whether you have a lot of money or a little money, those things are typically securities. Not always, but they're often securities. So stocks, bonds, exchange-traded funds. Most of Wall Street's driven by securities investments, okay? What they did was they convinced lawmakers to rewrite the code so that when you purchase a security through a broker or a dealer, so someone like Fidelity, for example, or Merrill Lynch, which is a Bank of America company, or any number of other big companies that are broker dealers, right? You're not actually buying the security itself. See, you think when you when you pay money for stocks and bonds and things like that, you put it in your retirement account. You think that you own it, even though someone else is holding it for you. You're the owner of that stock or that bond. But in reality, you're not. You're not the owner of that stock and bond. Because of the changes to the Uniform Commercial Code and other things that had happened prior to that, when you purchase one of these securities, you purchase in reality, not the security itself, but something called a security entitlement, which is basically just a contract that says that your broker has to provide you with certain benefits and there's certain legal protections tied up with that. But it's basically just a contract. The actual security itself is owned either by the broker or more likely by some larger custodian that holds these securities, these investments in pooled form. The biggest one in the United States is called the DTC. Okay. The DTC holds the vast majority of stock in the United States. The vast majority of investments are held by DTC. Okay. Non-real estate and stuff like that. So we're talking about stocks, bonds, exchange traded funds. These things are being held by DTC. DTC is owned by banks and brokers. These big banks and brokerage firms that use DTC, they own it. And DTC, what they do is they're the actual owners of all of these stocks and bonds and other securities. They're the ones that register ownership with a name called Seed and Company. Seed and Company is basically just a fictitious company that is the registered owner of almost all stock and bonds. So these people are the owners of your investments. You think you own your investments, but you don't. They own your investments. You own a contract that guarantees that you get certain rights to these investments. Okay. So why does that matter? Well, there's a variety of reasons for why that matters. But one of the biggest is in the event of a financial crash, in the event that a broker that you've been doing business with, like Fidelity or whatever, you have your retirement account with, or a pension has an account with, in the event that that broker goes bankrupt, you don't own the underlying securities that you've paid for along with the broker fees with one of these brokers, right? You don't actually own those things. So when you get to bankruptcy court and the court is divvying out the remaining assets, right? They're divvying out what's left of the wealth of this company that's going bankrupt. Because you are not the actual owner of these securities, there are a lot of situations where you may not get any of your money back from the broker. Okay? You may not get any of your money back from the broker. Now, a lot of these brokers have insurance. They hold insurance, and there's something called CBDC, which is kind of like the FDIC. It's like, which is insurance for banks, bank accounts. CBDC guarantees that you get, it's up to $500,000 worth of your investments back in the event that a broker fails, collapses. Okay. That's not under every single situation. There are exceptions to that. The people who got screwed over by Bernie Madoff, for example, were not able to get money from CBDC, for example. They may have been able, because they sued after the fact, they may have gotten it eventually. I don't know. But I know that initially they didn't, because there's these exceptions clauses that are a part of CBDC. So it's not 100% guaranteed that you'll get your money. Also, it only guarantees up to $250,000 in cash out of that $500,000. So if you had, say, $300,000 sitting in a brokerage account, you wouldn't be able to get all that back, even under CBDC. Now, CBDC sounds like, well, who cares if you don't have ownership of your securities? Why does that matter? Because I guess if one of these brokers fails, yeah, okay, thanks to the Uniform Law Commission and lawmakers that went along with these changes, you wouldn't be first in line to get access to your wealth. You may not get your wealth back. But CBDC will come in and they'll bail everybody out anyway, right? Just like the FDIC, they promise that they're going to give people money in the event that banks fail. So you don't really have to worry about banks being irresponsible and losing your money, because you're going to get your money back. That's the idea behind CBDC. Well, the problem is CBDC basically doesn't have any money, not relative to the amount of securities that exist in brokerage accounts, right? There are trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in brokerage accounts all across the United States, just in the United States, trillions and trillions of dollars. I think when I looked it up, I could be wrong, but I could not have this exactly right, but I'm pretty sure that when I looked up the total assets under administration control by Fidelity, just Fidelity, it was around $10 trillion. I might have that a little bit off. It might have been 11, it might have been 9, but it was somewhere in that range. Okay. SIPC Insurance, the SIPC Insurance Fund that they're supposedly going to pay out to everybody if these brokerage accounts all go bankrupt, they've got about $4 billion. $4 billion to cover everybody in the event of a widespread failure, right? So, in the event of a widespread failure, you might think my broker just went out of business, but they were holding my stocks and my bonds and things like that. I should be able to get those back. Except those stocks and bonds don't really belong to you because of the changes that were made in the 1990s to the Uniform Commercial Code. They belong to the broker, or more realistically to DTC, which is owned by brokers and banks. So you are not first in line to get your money back. And the law that the Uniform Law Commission wrote, that's now part of the UCC, that very specifically says that regular individual investors are not first in line. They're not first in line to get this money back. There are some situations where they would be first in line, but in many situations, in the event of a failure, they would not be first in line. And so you would actually not get all of your wealth back because SIPC doesn't have the money to pay you back to cover your losses. And because in the event of a really widespread financial collapse, they wouldn't have that money for you. And because you don't actually own your own investments. And all of this was done by the Uniform Law Commission. Behind the scenes, the vast majority of people had no idea what was going on. Even a lot of Republicans and Democratic politicians didn't know that that was what they were signing up for because, again, the Uniform Commercial Code is really, really confusing. So obviously, this is not a good thing. This is a really bad thing. Now, why would they want this whole sort of system set up that way? Why would they want to take your property rights away from you? Well, one of the benefits of having your property rights taken away from you is these big financial institutions that have pooled everybody's securities investments, stocks, bonds, etc., ETFs, into these big pool DTC pools. These big financial institutions are able to use the securities in those pools for their own financial agreements and investments and things that they're doing behind the scenes. They're able to do that. They can't use it in every way imaginable, but they are able to make money off of those investments being held by DTC. Okay. And it gets really, really complicated and really in the weeds. But the basics that you need to get down, that you need to understand, that you need to have drilled into your mind is that you don't actually own your own investments, the vast majority of them, even though you think you do. You think your retirement account belongs to you, it doesn't. You think your pension belongs to you or your pension fund, it doesn't. You think that your stocks and your bonds and all of that you've purchased, your ETFs, etc., that you've purchased through your Fidelity account or your Merrill Lynch account or any of the other brokerage accounts, you think that they belong to you, they don't. They're owned by someone else. And yes, they have a contract with you and they have to treat you well overall. But in the event of a catastrophe, in the event of a big crash, you could lose a lot of money. You could lose a lot of money. And all of this was made possible in law, a lot of the blame deserves to be laid at the doorstep of the Uniform Law Commission. Okay, so they've absolutely destroyed people's personal property rights. Huge, huge issue. That's the first thing. But that's not the only thing. It's not just things like that. There's all sorts of crazy things that the Uniform Law Commission has been pushing for as well. In recent years, the Uniform Law Commission, well, by the way, before we move on to the next section here, the Uniform Law Commission has been fighting lawmakers who have been trying to fix the problem that we just talked about. The changes that were made to the Uniform Commercial Code to take your property rights away. There have been some states that have been trying to fix that. They've been trying to go in and amend the Uniform Commercial Code to fix that. And the Uniform Law Commission has been fighting it because they don't want anyone to fix that. Okay. And that's been going on. That's been going on in recent months. We're not talking about years ago. We're not talking about something that happened in the 1990s. We're talking about something that's happening right now. So states are trying to fix this problem. The Uniform Law Commission is trying to stop them from fixing this problem because they don't want you to have your personal property rights. They don't want you to own your own investments. They don't want that. They don't want you to have that control. All right. So Section 2, this is really going to blow your mind. I did an entire video on this topic that we're going to talk about here in Section 2, called the Public Health Emergency Authority Act. So if you're interested in learning more about that one specific thing, I would highly encourage you to watch that video. I'll make sure that there's a link for that in the show notes, because it's absolutely incredible. We're not going to go over all the details of that here, but the basics of it is this. In 2023, so last year, the Uniform Law Commission created passed model legislation that they had been working on for a little while, called the Public Health Emergency Authority Act. And the goal of this legislation is, and I'm really not exaggerating this. I'm not. You'll see when we get into the details. The goal of this legislation is to give governors in states across the country quasi-dictatorial powers. Okay? Quasi-autocratic powers in the event of a future public health emergency, which is very broadly defined. It could be almost anything. Okay? I'm going to pull up on the screen here for you some of the details of the things that governors would be able to do. Now, this law has not been passed anywhere yet. The ULC just put this out. They're going to try to get lawmakers to pass it. They haven't gotten it passed yet, but the ULC has approved this. This has got the ULC stamp of approval on it already. Okay, the Uniform Law Commission. This is the kind of stuff that they're dreaming up over at the ULC. Here, let me pull this up here so that you can see it. All right, here we go. Let's all right, so the Public Health Emergency Order Renewal. This is Section 6 of this legislation. Here it says that during the term of a declaration of a public health emergency, the governor may issue one or more public health emergency orders under this section. An order may apply to all or part of a political subdivision or geographic area subject to the declaration. Okay, so here are the things that the governor can do. These are the orders the governor can do under this ULC proposal. Number 1, acquisition, stockpiling, hoarding, commandeering, distribution, management, or use of drugs, devices, equipment, or tests. Okay, so the governor has the ability to essentially take over the distribution, management, use of drugs, devices, basically the healthcare system. Okay. Number 2, acquisition, allocation, distribution, management, or spending of authorized funds. So they get to control spending. All right. Zoning, operation, commandeering, management, or use of buildings, shelters, facilities, parks, outdoor space, or other physical space, and the management of activities in those places. So governors get to control all buildings, essentially, the control of the buildings, operation of the buildings, zoning laws, etc. Number 4, testing, isolation, quarantine, movement, gathering, evacuation, or relocation of individuals. So the governor gets to tell people where to go, how to live, whether they can leave their house or not, whether they can go to work or not, whether the kids can go to school or not. Number 5, testing, isolation, quarantine, culling, that means killing, movement, evacuation, relocation, or management of plants and animals. Governor gets to keep control of all management of plants and animals. This is crazy. We could go on and on and on. Here's another famous one, another really important one. Should be famous. Number 7, surveillance, monitoring, or assessment of the public health emergency or any of its effects. So anything that could be impacting this public health emergency, the governor gets to surveil you. Whether, even if it's not directly about it, it's just related to the effects of the public health emergency, the governor gets to surveil you. The suspension of a provision of any statute, order, rule, or regulation if strict compliance would hinder efforts to respond to the public health emergency or pose undue hardship or risk. So if it's something is too risky, the governor gets to just to pretend that that law doesn't exist. We could go on and on and on. There's a bunch of other things in here as well, but I think you get the point. This is from the Uniform Law Commission. This was written by the Uniform Law Commission. Model Public Health Emergency Authority Act. approved and recommended for enactment in all the states by the ULC. Okay. Now that's crazy, right? That's nuts. That's totally crazy. That's the kind of thing that the Uniform Law Commission is now starting to get involved with. They want every state in the country, red, blue, purple, doesn't matter. They want you to let your governors become quasi-dictators. Now you might be saying, okay, well, maybe there's something in the law that allows the state legislature or some other independent agency or something to stop governors if they're becoming too authoritarian. And the answer to that, if you believe that, then you'd be sadly mistaken, because there's nothing in it that would do that. There's very few things that legislatures can do under that law, if it was passed, under that bill. There's very few things that a legislature could do to stop a governor other than just passing a new law. There are some exceptions that could theoretically be used, but they're very limited. For the most part, the governor, under this proposal, would create these public health emergency declarations for 45 to 90 days, depending on how they wanted to write the law from state to state. And then they could unilaterally, in essence, renew that public health emergency over and over and over again forever. And legislatures could do very little about it other than pass a new law. There are, again, some exceptions to that, but they are very limited. And how is a legislature going to pass a law to stop a governor from having too much power if the governor can veto the bill? So you would have to have like supermajorities or something to get it through the governor if the governor is vetoing these bills because the governor wants to keep its powers, or his or her powers, right? So you could see how dangerous this legislation is. Uniform Law Commission, again, they have this reputation. Most people don't even know who they are, but of the people that do know who they are, Republicans and Democrats alike, they have this reputation of being, these people are just the common sense commercial law people. Does anything that I just read to you sound like these are the common sense commercial law people? Nope. Nope, nope, nope. They are radical. This organization has become a radical, quasi-authoritarian group. Quasi-authoritarian group. Absolutely stunning that this is what's been going on with the Uniform Law Commission. I want to give you one more example before we wrap the episode up. One of the big fights that occurred in states last year in 2023 was revisions suggested by the Uniform Law Commission to the Uniform Commercial Code that would change the way that state commercial law understands what money is, how it treats not money, how it treats electronic money, how it treats Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and things like that. And the Uniform Law Commission was selling this as this really great thing for cryptocurrencies. This was really going to help cryptocurrencies. And there is stuff in that model legislation that the Uniform Law Commission put forward that undoubtedly would have benefits for cryptocurrencies. Okay. But what the legislation would also do, and some states have already started passing this bill, so this isn't theoretical, they've already started making these changes, is it would make it impossible for any existing cryptocurrency to ever be considered money under commercial law. So even if the United States government came out and said Bitcoin is the official money of the United States, this law would ensure that regardless of what the federal government says under state commercial law, it would not be considered money because it is explicitly excluded from that. Okay. Now, supporters of those changes would say that that's because Bitcoin and things like that are better off not being considered official money, but that really shouldn't be up to them to decide, should it? Okay. If the people decide through their elected representatives to make a cryptocurrency money, then that should be money. The Uniform Commercial Code shouldn't be the ones messing with that. All right. Unless, of course, whatever the federal government is doing is going to severely infringe on people's individual rights, in which case states should push back. But declaring Bitcoin money or another cryptocurrency money at the federal level would actually dramatically increase people's individual freedoms and protections from surveillance and other things. That's why the federal government will probably never do that. But that's what the Uniform Commercial Code what is being updated to do. More importantly than that, though, is that there are other changes to the Uniform Commercial Code that are being put into place related to money and electronic money and things of that nature that help lay the foundation for the creation and, for the rollout, I should say, not the creation, for the rollout and distribution and use of a central bank digital currency. A programmable, controllable, trackable, traceable central bank digital currency. Now, if you don't know what a central bank digital currency is, I'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes for you so that you can learn more about that. You could also pick up this incredible book called Dark Future, which I wrote with Glenn Beck and we published in 2023, which has a huge section on central bank digital currencies. It'll tell you everything you need to know about that topic. But in essence, a central bank digital currency is a new kind of currency, even if it's called a dollar. It's actually a new currency created by the federal government and or by the Federal Reserve, likely managed by the Federal Reserve. That could be, it would not be, there would be no printed component of it. So you couldn't put it in your pocket or something like that. It would exist purely in digital form. And all of the design options that we've seen that are being considered for the most part seriously by the federal government, by the Biden administration and others who are talking about a central bank digital currency now and talking about how to design it and planning the implementation of it for the future, even though they haven't said that it's 100% official that they're going to do this. They have said that they're studying it, they're planning it, they're working on the designs for it, they're coming up with all these things, but we're not sure we're going to do it, which is a joke. If you actually believe that, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn that I think you might find to be very useful for you. And I'm happy to offer to you for a massive sum of money. But look, this is a huge problem. The central bank digital currency, because it's digital, because it's programmable, because it can be designed so that it can be destroyed or created at will or tracked, traced, everything that you do with that money can be controlled, manipulated, or at the very least surveilled. So you would have no privacy under a system with a central bank digital currency. And the Uniform Commercial Code is now being changed to make it easier to use certain kinds of central bank digital currency designs that, again, hasn't been created yet because we don't have a central bank digital currency here in the United States. There are some countries that have created that, but we haven't. And most of those countries are very small countries. But there's no reason why freedom-loving people, especially in red states where they're always talking about how concerned they are, Republican politicians and voters, how concerned they are about the expanding power of the federal government, of the Fed, the irresponsible money printing that's been going on, the inflation, all of that, which would be so much worse under a central bank digital currency. Why would those states be passing laws under the Uniform Commercial Code to make it easier to use a central bank digital currency? Why would they do that? Why would that be something that states would be signing up to do? We don't even have one yet. It's not like you could say, well, they got to do it because, the federal government created it and people are using it and you got to change the commercial code for it. I don't buy that explanation. I think states should resist when it comes to central bank digital currencies. But even if you did buy it, a central bank digital currency does not exist yet. So why do we need to be passing laws that make it easier to use it? Well, the only reason why you would do that is to lay the foundation for a central bank digital currency. So state lawmakers that are concerned about a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, started looking a little bit harder at the Uniform Commercial Code. And they realized that there are things that they can do to the Uniform Commercial Code to make it even tougher for a central bank digital currency to come into existence. Not only could they reject what the Uniform Law Commission has been pushing in its 2022 amendments to sort of lay the groundwork for a central bank digital currency, but we could also change the existing code, specifically code related to deposit accounts, so that a central bank digital currency would be hard to use in commercial law at the state level, as sort of a way to push back against the federal government, which ultimately does have control over currencies, right? So what can states do? Not a lot. They can change their commercial codes, and that's what a lot of lawmakers across the country are doing. Well, the ULC doesn't like that. On the one hand, ULC experts are out there telling lawmakers they don't like central bank digital currencies. But then on the other hand, they're trying to create laws. They're trying to get lawmakers, I would argue, to fool lawmakers into passing bills that make it easier to use certain kinds of central bank digital currencies. And at the very least, what they're trying to do is stop state lawmakers from changing their codes so that it's harder to use central bank digital currencies. So regardless of how you think about the 2022 changes and changing the definition of money and creating this category called electronic money and making it impossible for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to be used officially as money under the commercial code, all of that, regardless of what you think of that, there are things in the current code that make it easy for a central bank digital currency to be rolled out. And some state lawmakers in states all across the country, not all of them, but a sizable number, want to change the code so that it's hard to use a central bank digital currency under commercial law, or even impossible. And the Uniform Law Commission is out there fighting against that. Why? Well, I think it's pretty obvious, because I think they want a central bank digital currency. That's why. I think that's what they want. And I think they know it's coming, and I think they're trying to lay the foundation so that when it does come, the state commercial codes are all set up so that it's an easy transition, because that's what they want. I mean, it's speculation, but what other conclusion could you possibly come to? So I know some of this stuff has been in the weeds. I know that, but think about what we've talked about so far. Your property rights have been destroyed because of the Uniform Law Commission, in large part. Not entirely because of them, but in large part because of them. Your property rights have been destroyed. You actually don't own your own investments. And because of that and other changes that they made to the UCC, you don't have first priority over getting your money back in the event that a financial catastrophe happens. So they're not looking out for you. All right? That's number one. Number two, they're trying to pass emergency authority bills that allow governors to become quasi-dictators, right? Does anybody, especially limited government people, but even Democrats, I mean, do you want your governor to have that kind of authority over you, where they could just start killing animals and plants, quarantining people, commandeering the healthcare system, ignoring legislation whenever they feel like it, because there's a public health emergency, whatever that means? They can mean, and then they can keep extending this forever. Does anybody think that's a good idea? Well, the Uniform Law Commission does. They do. And they're actively trying to get lawmakers to pass legislation to codify those changes so that a governor in your state, whether it's a red state or a blue state, or a purple state, could become a dictator in the future, a quasi-dictator. Does anybody support that? No, of course not. Number three, the Uniform Law Commission is helping to lay the foundation for a central bank digital currency, or even if you don't interpret some of the changes that they've been making to do that, at the very least, it's not even in dispute that they're trying to stop lawmakers in states all across the country from passing bills that would make it harder for a central bank digital currency to be used under commercial law. They're actively fighting that. Why are they doing that? Because the Uniform Law Commission is a radical organization. At the very beginning, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I did not. I don't think I did. At the very beginning, I mentioned you're going to be blown away when you find out where the money comes from. Who is funding the Uniform Law Commission? Well, the Uniform Law Commission is a nonprofit organization. And my understanding is that they do have some donors, but most of their money comes from state appropriations. State appropriations. What does that mean? It means that you, the taxpayer, is paying for the Uniform Law Commission to do the things it's doing. You're paying for this. You, the taxpayer, you're paying for this. For them to advocate for governors to become quasi-dictators. You're paying for them to do that. And I know we only talked about 3 bills here, but there are other things too. And the more you dig into this, the more you're going to find. The Uniform Law Commission is a radical organization. And anyone who says otherwise either doesn't know, really hasn't taken the time to learn it, study it, understand what's going on, or they're okay with what the Uniform Law Commission is doing. And you got to ask yourself, who would possibly be okay with taking away people's property rights? Who would possibly be okay with a programmable, controllable central bank digital currency? Who would possibly be okay with governors becoming quasi-dictators? Who? Who are these people? It's not voters. They don't want that. Certainly not Republican voters. They don't want that. This organization is dangerous. And they've become essentially a wing of I don't want to say they're a quasi-government agency, but they kind of are. Because when you go and you look at what's happening in the fights in these states, in 2024, there was a huge battle in South Dakota, is a really good example of this, where they were trying to fix some of the property rights issues that we discussed earlier, or at least make it slightly better by revising the Uniform Commercial Code. And the ULC came in and stomped it out. They teamed up with Republican leadership in that state and they stomped it out. Why are they doing that? Who are these people? Why are we allowing this to happen? We, the people, why are we allowing this? The truth is because you probably never heard of it, right? You probably didn't know that you don't own your own investments. You probably didn't know that governors are, that there's this organization out there that is working hand in hand with your state lawmaker, Republican or Democrat, to completely transform gubernatorial powers. You probably didn't know that there were these people who are trying to lay the foundation for a CBDC, or at the very least try to stop people who are making it difficult for a CBDC to become a reality. You probably didn't know about this group, but you do now. So what are you going to do about it? That's going to be the most important thing. This organization's been around for a long time. They've done a lot of really great work, but they have become a radical organization that must be stopped. And I hope that videos like this are the first step forward. So please share this video. Please leave a comment, like the video. If you're listening to the podcast version of it, share it with a friend. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and other podcast platforms. All of this is going to help more people see this content, and people need to see this content. People need to know who the Uniform Law Commission is. They need to know that their lawmakers, a lot of them, don't even know how bad this group is. Share it with your lawmaker. That would be really effective, I think. Until next time, my name is Justin Haskins. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video.